Hello and welcome to Study Abroad and School Experience. It's March and it's Women's History Month, and I decided to do something where I interview women in education and careers to have them share their experience with you and maybe offer helpful pointers and tips that you can use in the future. And today we have a special guest.
Hi everyone, my name is Megan. I'm a social work student at Aurora University.
Okay, I'm going to ask Megan some questions. The first question is, what is the highest level of education that you have completed, and where did you attend school?
The highest level of education that I completed was at the University of Illinois. I received my Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Anthropology with a Women and Gender Studies minor, and I received that back in 2014.
Okay, so you spoke about what you studied, but what are you currently studying? Well, you mentioned it earlier, but what are you currently studying, and how did you choose your major? I would say for both undergraduate and graduate school, and can you talk about funding options?
Sure. So I studied sociology and anthropology in undergraduate at UIS. Um, and I started studying that because, I was really interested in kind of looking at society from like a system view, being open to understanding what's going on currently, and both here and globally. And so that was something that was really interesting to me, the open-endedness of it, being able to kind of be open with what my next steps were in terms of my career. I knew that I didn't want to be like a doctor or, anything else that had specific steps that you had to follow. And so I just wanted to kind of keep it open. I think generally at like liberal arts colleges and universities, if you study something that's, more open, like a social science background, there's more kind of options in terms of your next steps. If you go on to graduate school or if you get work right after you graduate. And so that's kind of where I started with undergrad, was kind of being open to my options. I didn't declare a major, I think, until after my first semester. And then with my Women and Gender Studies minor, it wasn't until after I had taken a few courses in sociology and anthropology. I believe at least one course that crossed over with Women and Gender Studies. And then I decided to take on that minor since it really interested me. So I definitely say my path in undergrad was more along kind of my heart and kind of what I was interested in learning next. I think I grew up in kind of a bubble before that, and was really not open to, just wasn't really open to other opportunities in terms of what to study, and so I really wanted to expand my knowledge on different things, just kind of explore. Trying to think if there's anything else to add. I would say, a lot of 18-year-olds, graduating from high school, they don't necessarily know what they want to do yet in terms of their career. I think it's a really young age to kind of, be trying to force yourself to pick a, career path. So I think keeping it open for me was really good. But I do know that there are a lot of people out there that, do, maybe for financial reasons or other reasons, have to kind of decide on something to study and accomplish by the end of 4 years. So yeah, I think it just depends on your path and what you're interested in, and doing something that you love, but also something that will, either if you need financial support, that will help you in that way too. I'll definitely talk about funding for me. My parents told me that they weren't going to pay for my college, so I definitely had to think about funding in terms of my education. So with University of Illinois Springfield, UIS, there was a honors program that I was fortunate to get into. And they did provide a lot of the funding for my undergraduate years. And then just finding other scholarships as well, based on funding or merit, to help pay for my undergraduate years. I guess I didn't touch on this yet. I also did an AmeriCorps year right after my undergraduate years, and that AmeriCorps service year definitely was a good learning opportunity, and definitely kind of opened up my ideas about what I want to do next. And also I received an education award through AmeriCorps. So if people are interested in AmeriCorps, you do get an education award at the completion of your service, which can go toward past schooling or towards any future schooling as well. And then when I'm studying now in social work, it took me about 4 years after my AmeriCorps year to decide what I wanted to do in terms of my next steps in terms of schooling. I ultimately decided on social work because I felt that that was something I really wanted to study, and also that I wanted to be a social worker. And to be a social worker, you do have to get your master's in social work, and then typically a lot of jobs do want you to get your license in social work or your clinical license in social work. And for funding for my graduate years, definitely taking out loans for that, and so being able to strategically pick schools based on how much it's going to cost was really important to me, but also what kind of education I was going to receive. So yeah, I think that kind of paints a picture of the trajectory from my undergraduate years and then to my graduate school.
Okay. So how do you feel about education, the current state? Like, what are your beliefs of the state of education as it stands?
Yeah. So this is definitely a tougher question in terms of, definitely I will harken back to, my sociology background around education and seeing education as, both a system, but also, something that individuals have to complete in order to move on in society. And so with public education in America, I think there are definitely a lot of inequalities in the education system. I think most people recognize those inequalities. With a sociology background, we definitely learned a lot about how the education system works, like the social reproduction theory around education, the distinct differences of choice that families have in terms of educating their children in an urban setting versus a suburban setting, and next steps based on those choices that they have. And so I definitely think that that's still true, that basically if you are in a certain school, or if you have certain resources in that school, it can then replicate the original school or the original family's background. And so I think that that's really important to consider when it comes to education, and talks about how do we change our education system to be more equitable, to be more distributing of resources. I think that that's really important conversations. And we've had those, in my undergraduate years, and then I think a lot of people, like social justice groups, are really talking about education now, and trying to make it more equitable and more resource sharing, and more just kind of a better system for a lot of different groups of people. So I think for me, the education system, I definitely had a lot more choices when I was growing up in terms of my education, and more resources because of where I was educated. And so I think just being aware of that, and being aware of that privilege that I had and have, and trying to make the world more equitable.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else to add. I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of great work in terms of, trying to make the system better for a lot of folks. So.
Okay. So what are your next educational and career goals? What do you currently do? And you can just talk about the field, like if you work part-time, if there's an internship that you have going on right now, and then I'll save that follow-up question for the next one. So go.
Yeah, so I think for me, definitely, in terms of my education and, having to secure internships is a really big part of my education for a master's of social work. Most programs will have you, select at least 1 or 2 internships based on the track that you're in. I know students who have had social work in their background, in their undergraduate, they do get to do kind of a fast track route through graduate school. So I believe that they only do about 1 internship. And then for my program, since I didn't have that background in undergrad, I've had to do 2 internships. So my first internship, which was at a substance use recovery center, I had, definitely developed a lot of my clinical skills there. And then my current internship at a medical center, a veterans medical center, I'm also working part-time in addition to the internship. And so definitely in this internship, expanding on, my clinical skills, case management skills, teamwork skills. And so definitely trying to secure an internship can be difficult, I would say. You have to, apply to a bunch of different internships, interview with those, and then you ultimately either get selected for an internship. I know the first year, if you are in the regular track, so not the fast track, so if you're doing 2 internships, the first internship typically can be any experience in social work, but the second internship should be an internship that's in your specialization. And I haven't really talked about, I guess, my specialization, which is healthcare. So I decided to do a internship in a hospital setting. So currently I'm in an inpatient psych unit, and then also in our suicide prevention coordination team. So the first semester I was in that inpatient psych unit, and I still go up there to run a group. That is more, intakes, doing assessments, those clinical skills, and then case management skills. And then in terms of my, the second part of my internship and with the suicide prevention team, it's a lot of, responding and following up to crisis calls, working with a caseload of patients who are at high risk of suicide. And so I think, picking an internship that really, interests you, and then also can build on the skills that you want to build on, so that when it comes time to, actually looking for a full-time job after you're done with your graduate school, that it's something that you've practiced and something that you're interested in doing next. And so I like both. My first internship, I had the outpatient experience, and that was with substance use. And so that was definitely an interesting experience. And then with my second internship, it's an inpatient experience with some outpatient work in terms of working with a high-risk caseload. That is, those patients are, outside of the hospital setting. So I think finding something that you're interested in, that you're passionate about, definitely for graduate school, and then also for your internships, because work experience is really important for understanding what you want to do next. You can read about different, social work or whatever you're interested, whatever field you're interested in. You can read about a lot of, what those folks do, what social workers do, but it's another thing when you actually see it in practice and actually go through the motions and do all of the work that you're reading about. So it's definitely something that you should really think about when you're planning your graduate experience. What kind of internship do you want, which will lead to potentially, a job experience after that.
Okay.
So hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah, very comprehensive. Good stuff.
Okay.
So you kind of talked about skills, but what are the skills that you believe someone would need in your field? Because you came from a sociology, anthropology background, and you went to social work after AmeriCorps and the hiatus from school. But those subjects are similar in some aspects, but very different. So how was that for you? And I guess what skills did you take from social anthro and apply to social work? We did this earlier. Technology was not on our side, so
Yeah. So I think you're right. They're similar in some ways, but with sociology and anthropology, it's definitely a more systems-wide perspective. So understanding how systems work, how individuals then have to deal with those systems. And so I think first transitioning from that to social work definitely had to kind of switch my outlook in terms of working in it with a population. Trying to understand that population is really important. So you bring some of that sociology background into social work, but you also have to really develop your clinical skills, your case management skills. So being able to work individually with clients and help them with whatever needs they have, but also to advocate for them. So there is, some kind of social justice element to social work. It is one of the core principles of social work as well. And so being able to both support and then advocate for clients, but also to empower your clients as well to advocate for themselves, I think is really important too. I'm trying to think in terms of like my internship and my experience now. I think being able to work on a interdisciplinary team, so with doctors, with nurses, psychiatrists, there's a lot of different disciplines that you'll be working with in the hospital setting, and just in that specialization of healthcare. I think there's a lot of different disciplines that you'll be working with. So being able to, understanding, their background, their terminology, but also still then advocating for your patient. Trying to think of other skills. I think, with social work, you're working a lot with individuals, at least for clinical social work. And so you have to be able to, assess their needs, but also build, rapport with them. So not only assess and do the intake process and figure out how to support them and discharge and all these different things, but the biggest part is being able to understand your client, being able to build rapport with them, so that they trust you as their social worker. So I think those are the biggest skills. I guess with clinical skills, there's also building your therapeutic interventions, and that's really important, so that you know what interventions to use with which clients, and also explaining it to clients as well. So really knowing why you're using what you're using, and involving the client in that process so that they understand as well, and that they have choice too. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different, I think a lot of skills from sociology can be used in social work, but there's a lot of learning in social work, not only from the textbook, but also I think really just getting your experience in the internships.
Okie dokie. What has been more valuable to you, working or education in reference to your career? What do you think is more valuable?
Yeah, I think for me, I think both are really important. Um, I really like how my program, because I did do a part-time program, so instead of 2 years, it did take me 3 years to do this program. Um, my first year was all education, so it was really just getting kind of all the basics down, just because I hadn't studied social work before in my undergraduate years. So being able to really delve deep into kind of what I would be doing as a social worker. And then my second year, starting my first internship, and my third year doing my second internship. So I think both the education components and the work experience that you get in your social work, you know, study is definitely really important because you can't really do one without the other. And I think with work experience, it can be very challenging. Internships are not typically paid. And so being able to balance, I know that some students had to balance, working another part-time job with working their internship. And that was definitely the case for me. Like I couldn't just do my internship and schooling. I had to work part-time. And so that was definitely tough to balance for sure. But I think being able to get support from family or friends if you can, um, you know, if you need to take time off, like I had to take time off between my undergrad and graduate school to, save up money to be able to do this. I think that's really important to think about. But yeah, I think definitely trying to, manage both, the education part. So the coursework, some schools may be taking, 3 to 4 courses at a time. I was lucky that I only had to take 2 at a time. And so just finding the program that works best for you and your schedule is really important. For me, it was an online format. So with Aurora University, they give you different options. You can do an in-person versus an online format. And I really appreciate the online for the flexibility that allowed, that I could still work full-time my first year and then move down to part-time, but also do my internships at the same time. So yeah, definitely it is hard to do the work experience when you're not getting paid. So I definitely will put that out there. I empathize with a lot of other students who, struggle with having to find an internship and also not get paid for that internship. My second internship was actually paid, so that was a really good experience for me because, I didn't have to worry about income while I was doing that internship experience. So it's really just kind of finding a balance between classes, your internship, and if you do work part-time in addition to that.
Okay. So, in terms of getting your license for social work, would you be able to use the hours that you clocked at the internship for like maybe clinical hours once you become licensed or along the process to become licensed? Because I don't know how it is in Illinois, but I know that in New York they have to have a certain amount of clinical hours.
Mm. Yeah, I think for licensing, from my understanding, so in terms of after for this year, after I graduate, I can get my license in social work, and I can do that after I graduate and sit for the license. So I don't need to have any clinical hours docked for that. I just need to have my master's of social work to take that test and get the license. And the law had changed in Illinois, so I'm not sure how it is, in other states across the country, but at least in Illinois where I'm at, you could technically sit for the exam the semester that you're graduating, so that once you graduate, you can get your license in social work pretty quickly after that. But because of COVID, unfortunately, even though the law changed, you can't actually take the test until after you graduate, after it's on the ED form of the application for the license. That ED form has to say that you've graduated. So even though, the law has changed, the actual process hasn't changed, at least in Illinois. So I'm not sure how it is in other states. I know you mentioned New York. But then for the clinical license, so that's different from the regular license. The LCSW, you have to get, I believe it is 3,000 hours, at least in Illinois, to get the clinical license, also to sit for the exam. So you have to have that many hours supervised by someone else who is an LCSW, so licensed clinical social worker, to be able to supervise you. I believe it's at least 1 hour a week. Currently, my internship right now, I'm getting 2 hours of supervision a week. I get one in my group supervision, and then I get one in individual supervision with my supervisor. So, it's really important after you graduate that when MSW students who maybe are getting their license, their LSW, right after they graduate, that if they're looking to get their clinical license, so their LCSW, that they will be supervised by someone at their workplace that does have an LCSW. And if you don't have that, I do believe that then you can find supervision elsewhere, or you'll have to pay for that supervision. I know that some students who've graduated and gotten a job, they've actually had to pay for their supervision. So if your next job after you graduate, I've heard if that provides free supervision, that's really great and something to really look for in a job after you graduate. So yeah, it does take a while to get the clinical license. The regular license, it does, you do have to graduate, I guess, for now, until, I guess, this pandemic is over. So I'm not really sure when that will change. But hopefully that clears up that question.
Sure. It's good stuff. People are going to learn about social work in Illinois, so it's all good. Okay. What would you tell someone who is interested in going to a trade school or community college and they have no interest, at least immediately, in transferring to a four-year institution? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. For me, I don't really have any judgment about, whatever anyone's really interested in doing next after their high school experience. That's up to them. I do know that, choices are different for a lot of people. Sometimes college isn't a choice for some people because of the cost, so that's really unfortunate. But if that's, if trade school or whatever you're interested in next is something that you're passionate about or want to do, go for it. I think, in our current state of society, jobs are stratified based on whether you do have a college degree or not, unfortunately. And so a lot of students do try to get that four-year degree, which can be very, very costly. So I think there's a lot of changes that need to go in terms of how we view education, like I had mentioned earlier, and next steps for a lot of students. And I think at 18, like I mentioned before, it's a very young age to know exactly what you want to do for the rest of your life. And I think there's also this notion that you're going to do something, the same job for many years, and that's definitely not true in our economy. So people do switch from different careers. And so I think anyone who's interested in going to community college or trade school, definitely that's something that you want to do, definitely go for it. I know in Chicago, community college is pretty accessible for a lot of folks, and so that can be a good transition, even then to going on to your four-year degree. So yeah, I think do what's best for you, given the choices that you have too. So yeah, I think in terms of funding, finding as many opportunities to help pay for stuff, and then hopefully in the future, there will be loan forgiveness. Yeah, right. So hopefully that's coming along, but I'm definitely hopeful about it, but I don't know if it will or not. So
Are there any positive words that you would like to offer anybody who might stumble upon this video after I
Oh.
upload it, or in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever time
Oh,
frame pops in your head in terms of positivity and spreading it
okay.
across the universe?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's a great question to end on. I think definitely, it's as cheesy as it sounds. I think, following your passion, something you're interested in, can really help. I know it's not an option for a lot of people, but I think definitely, if you can, follow what you're interested in, um, being open to different experiences if you can, um, trying to, lean on other people for support if you do have family or friends. So I think asking about positive messages is really great. I think, given the opportunities that people have and the choices that people have, I don't want to say, one thing or the other, but I definitely think finding something that you're interested in, um, whether it's for your career, for your hobby, something that you're passionate about, um, can be really helpful in life. And I think, with schooling, especially, for if anyone is in high school that's watching this, it can be hard to decide what your next steps are. So you're not alone in that. I think there's a lot of people who don't know what they want to do next, and that's okay. Taking a gap year even, or getting work experience, or even traveling, doing something fun, um, whatever you want to do right out of school or out of high school, before college. There's no right way of doing something. And so I think that that's what I definitely want to leave with, is that, my experience is my own experience, based on the choices that I had and the options. And so I think, doing what's right for you, and leaning on family or friends for support, finding a good group of people that you can, talk about these things with, or finding a mentor. I definitely still talk to one of my, really good professor friends from college, that still is a mentor to me. So finding someone that you can, talk with about career options or career next steps, is a really good idea as well. And just be you, and do what makes you happy, and finding something that you're passionate about, for sure. I'm trying to think if there's any other positive, uh, remarks that I want to leave. But yeah, I definitely, good luck with any steps that you have to take in terms of your education and career goals. It can be difficult, so, keep your head up. And definitely, know that you're not alone in any struggles that you're experiencing. So yeah.
All right, that's good. Well, thank you, Megan. And to everybody out there in the world, as I always say, take care, stay well, and be safe. Ciao.